The Georgia Court of Appeals has officially accepted the case involving Fani Willis and whether or not she should be disqualified from her attempted prosecution of President Trump and others, I think 15 other individuals in that case. Remember, her special counsel has been disqualified. This was down at the trial court level, and then there was an appeal made to the Georgia Court of Appeals. Their three-judge panel, which is a randomly drawn panel. This panel is two judges that were appointed by Governor Nathan Wade, one by Governor Kemp, so all three appointed by Republicans. But again, looking at whether or not she should also be taken off this case, which would, again, probably give this to a different DA or someone else involved, and they'd have to decide whether or not to even continue to bring this case. But what's really even, I think, secondarily very important here is to go over the timeline. But what I first want to remind you of is that the ACLJ didn't wait until this moment to say, okay, we'll file now because this is at the appeal court. We actually filed an interlocutory appeal. There it is on the screen for you, which, again, asking the Georgia Court of Appeals to consider this, to make sure that they did consider and they should consider whether or not Fani Willis is appropriately in the position to prosecute this case. But the secondary issue here, I want to go right to Will Haynes on because, Will, the secondary issue is the timeline.
They didn't even have to take this. They could have denied the appeal and let the case go forward. But whatever they saw in the briefing, including the one that we put forward, they decided this was something they needed to rule on. And now they've set a tentative oral argument date for October 4th, so just a month before the November election. But when you get into the details of how this court operates, it's a very busy court in Georgia, is that the Georgia Constitution mandates the matter must be decided within 2 terms of court, which means the justices would need to rule before mid-March of 2025.
2025.
Right. So now they also say they could technically do it on an expedited basis, but all the court watchers, according to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution that they asked, say that most cases at this court are decided roughly 8.5 months after they're first docketed. So from now, 8.5 months, that would put it early 2025, well after the November election. Put this in the column of one more case that will not go to trial before the presidential election.
And this is not the final court in Georgia.
Correct.
I mean, this is the Georgia Court of Appeals. Then you have the Georgia Supreme Court, which you could, of course, appeal to. They don't have to take the case again, like this court did not have to take the case. But again, that would take months as well. So, and this court has decided to take the case. You remember the trial court judge removed her special counsel who had taken in about $800,000 and say that he had been, because of their improper personal relationship and his lack of specialty in this case. Now, the Georgia Court of Appeals has done what we asked, which is accepted the case. So we know the judges, and we will now be able to file within that appeal a more extensive brief on why Fani Willis should be disqualified. And you see, again, this is not all about just fighting for, in this case, President Trump. It is again, it benefits him in the short term. In the long term, this is about all of us and the weaponization of the legal system, whether it's at the state level or the federal level, against conservatives and against people who speak out and are willing to put their names on the ballot or are willing to get involved in politics or even their attorneys. The appeals court is taking this very seriously, this issue of who is prosecuting President Trump.
Absolutely. So, Jordan, we have seen a cascading number of cases brought largely by left-wing Democrats, which are designed to do one thing, to engage in election interference. These cases are designed to preemptively prevent the leading national candidate on the Republican side for the highest office in the land. And if you look at the Fani Willis case, and if you look at her relationship with the so-called special prosecutor, her romantic relationship, what do we have? We have evidence, I would argue, of a clear and unmistakable conflict of interest. And so the ACLJ has filed an amicus brief in this particular case. Among other things, we have argued that Fani Willis was a conflicted prosecutor whose actions were tainted by the odor of mendacity. That is taken directly from the lower court's opinion, and this conflict, we have argued, cannot be remedied after the fact. And this particular conflict adversely affects the public's perception of justice in this particular case. So if you look at the now assembled panel, which will hear the case, and if you look at the timeline, one of the things that is brilliant about this particular appeal and the acceptance of the appeal by the Georgia Court of Appeals is it now takes the matter out of the glare of the upcoming election.
Now you'll file a full, a brief on the merits of why you believe, and ours would be an amicus brief because you'll have other filers as well, probably likely joining with President Trump, on why she is improperly in this position. And I mean, you can almost go right to MSNBC and pull clips from MSNBC to give the evidence about why she is improperly in this position, that she has basically run a campaign to prosecute President Trump and his allies, and won on that campaign, has already gotten in trouble with misusing funds and bringing in the special counsel, has not been able to get this case started. I mean, this was the first one going, and then everything came to a scorching halt. I remember when she showed up and she actually took the stand. I mean, Harry, there's so much to pull from that. And again, I always remind people, because we went back yesterday 13 months, just going back a few months in this case when Fani Willis showed up and actually walked into the courtroom and took the stand and was questioned.
Absolutely. And I think if you look at her testimony, you will find that she effectively indicted herself. And so, in other words, if you look at the evidence which she provided, there is a clear timeline suggesting that she was conflicted, that this particular special prosecutor, Mr. Wade, was appointed, at least in part, because he had a romantic relationship with the district attorney. And now the district attorney has paraded herself on news programs in churches in Atlanta, basically claiming that she is fighting for justice. I would argue that she is fighting to engage in election interference as part of the weaponization of the legal process designed to prevent the leading national candidate from basically running for office.